Dr. Sarah Chun's hands shake as she enters examination room 7. But not from nerves, from the unmistakable sound of controlled breathing she recognizes from combat zones. The rhythmic, measured inhales and exhales that soldiers use to maintain focus under pressure. She'd heard it countless times in field hospitals, in the back of medevac helicopters. In the moments before everything went to hell, the patient file reads, routine physical, but nothing about this feels routine. The man sitting on the examination table radiates lethal calm, his posture deceptively relaxed, yet coiled like a spring ready to unleash devastating force. Commander Jake Morrison's scarred hands rest motionless on his knees. But Sarah notices the calluses on his knuckles, the precise way his fingers are positioned, ready to strike or grab a weapon at a moment's notice. His eyes track her every movement like a predator assessing threat levels, cataloging exits, measuring distances. "Commander Morrison," Sarah says, forcing her voice to remain steady as she closes the door behind her. The soft click of the latch seems to echo in the sterile room. "I'm Dr. Chun. I'll be conducting your physical evaluation today." He doesn't respond immediately, just continues that unsettling stare. Sarah has dealt with difficult patients before, but there's something different about this one. Something that makes her skin crawl with a familiar dread. She thought she'd left behind 3 years ago, when Sarah accidentally drops her stethoscope while pulling it from her coat pocket. The metallic clatter against the linoleum floor shatters the tense silence. Morrison's hand instinctively moves toward his hip, where a sidearm would normally rest, his entire body shifting into a combat stance before he catches himself. The movement is so fluid, so automatic, that Sarah realizes this man has been in recent action. This isn't some desk jockey going through mandatory medical screening. Jumpy for a routine checkup, Sarah observes, her own military training kicking in as she bends to retrieve the stethoscope. She notices the fresh bandage on his shoulder, barely visible beneath his regulation t-shirt, and the way he favors his left side when he thinks she's not looking. "When was your last deployment, Commander?" "Classified," Morrison replies, his voice gravelly and controlled. But his eyes narrow slightly, studying her with renewed intensity. "You ask a lot of questions for a civilian contractor, Doc." Sarah's blood runs cold. How does he know she's a contractor and not military medical staff? That information isn't in his file, isn't something a patient would normally know about their examining physician. She forces herself to continue the routine, pulling on latex gloves with practiced efficiency, but her mind is racing. "Standard questions," she lies smoothly, approaching him with the blood pressure cuff. "I need to understand your recent medical history to conduct the proper evaluation." As she wraps the cuff around his muscular arm, Sarah notices more details that don't belong in a routine physical. Fresh rope burns on his wrists, partially healed. A small puncture wound behind his ear that looks suspiciously like an injection site. And when she listens to his heartbeat, it's too steady, too controlled, the rhythm of someone using advanced breathing techniques to mask physiological stress. "You've been through SEER training," Sarah states rather than asks, recognizing the signs of recent survival: evasion, resistance, and escape conditioning. "Recent refresher course?" Morrison's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. "What makes you think that?" "The injection site behind your ear suggests recent pharmaceutical interrogation resistance training. The rope burns indicate escape and evasion exercises. And your breathing pattern." Sarah pauses, meeting his gaze directly. "I've seen it before. In soldiers who've been through hell and lived to tell about it." For the first time since she entered the room, Morrison's carefully controlled facade cracks slightly. His eyes widen just a fraction, and Sarah sees something flicker across his features recognition. Confusion? She can't be sure, but it makes her stomach clench with anxiety. "Where exactly have you seen it before, Doc?" Morrison's voice drops to a dangerous whisper. "Because according to your file, You've been working civilian medical contracts for the past 3 years. No combat experience listed. Sarah's hands freeze on the blood pressure gauge. He's read her file thoroughly. This definitely isn't a routine physical. Her mind races through possibilities. Is he investigating her? Has someone finally tracked her down? The carefully constructed identity she's built over the past 3 years suddenly feels as fragile as tissue paper. I did a rotation in a trauma center, she says carefully. But even as the words leave her mouth, she knows they sound hollow. Saw a lot of veterans with PTSD. Morrison stands up slowly, his full height imposing in the small examination room. At 6'3", he towers over her, and Sarah has to resist the urge to step back. Every instinct screamed that she was in danger, but she couldn't show weakness. Not now. Trauma center, he repeats, his tone suggesting he doesn't believe a word of it. Funny thing about trauma centers, Doc. They don't usually teach you to recognize SEER training indicators. That's pretty specialized knowledge. Sarah's heart pounds against her ribs, but she forces herself to maintain eye contact. I'm very thorough in my assessments, Commander. Now, if you could please sit back down so I can complete your examination. No. Morrison's voice cuts through her professional demeanor like a blade. I don't think this is about my examination at all. I think you know exactly why I'm here. The room feels smaller suddenly, the walls closing in. Sarah's hand moves instinctively toward the panic button near the door, but Morrison notices the movement immediately. I wouldn't do that if I were you, he says quietly. Because if you're who I think you are, hitting that button is going to bring the wrong kind of attention. The kind that gets people killed. Sarah's blood turns to ice. The way he says it, with absolute certainty and grim experience, tells her that Commander Jake Morrison knows far more about her situation than any routine physical patient should. And if he knows, then others might know too. The carefully constructed walls she's built around her new life are crumbling. And Sarah realizes that this examination room might be the last place she ever sees as Dr. Sarah Keene, civilian contractor. Because the ghost of her past has just walked through the door, and he's wearing the uniform of a Navy SEAL. Morrison's world tilts when Sarah reaches across him to check his blood pressure for the second time, claiming the first reading was inconclusive. Her scent antiseptic mixed with something uniquely her. A faint trace of lavender that somehow survived the clinical environment triggers a violent flashback that hits him like a freight train dot. Suddenly, he's not in the sterile examination room anymore. He's back in Kandahar, 3 years ago, buried under 2 tons of concrete and twisted steel beams. The taste of dust and blood fills his mouth. His left leg is trapped beneath a massive chunk of debris, and he can feel the warm wetness spreading down his thigh, arterial bleeding that means he has minutes, not hours. Enemy fire rains down through the collapsed roof of what used to be a medical supply depot. Muzzle flashes lighting up the smoke-filled darkness like deadly fireworks. The pain is excruciating, but it's the sound that haunts him most, the wet, labored breathing of his teammate Rodriguez, pinned somewhere in the rubble nearby, each breath weaker than the last. Morrison had tried to reach him, clawing through the debris until his fingernails split and bled. But the steel beam across his leg held him fast. Then she appeared. A steel beam across his leg held him fast. Then she'll beam across his leg held him fast. Then she appeared. Figure in blood-soaked scrubs had crawled through the rubble like some kind of avenging angel. Ignoring the bullets that sparked off the concrete around her, she moved with purpose, with deadly calm, assessing the situation in seconds. "Stay with me, soldier," she'd whispered, her voice cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. "I'm going to get you out of here." Morrison remembers the way her hands moved, precise, confident, never hesitating, even as insurgent rounds chewed up the walls around them. She'd worked to free his leg while simultaneously applying pressure to his femoral artery, somehow managing to do both with an efficiency that spoke of extensive combat experience. When a piece of shrapnel had opened up her own arm, she barely glanced at it, just kept working. Ghost, he breathes now, using the nickname his unit had given the mysterious medic who vanished after the mission. The woman who'd saved not just his life, but Rodriguez's too, and 3 other members of his team. The medic who'd appeared out of nowhere during the worst firefight of his career and disappeared. Just as mysteriously once the dust settled, Sarah's face goes white as bone. The blood pressure cuff slips from her suddenly nerveless fingers, and she backs toward the door like a cornered animal. But Morrison is faster, his hand slamming against the doorframe, blocking her escape route. The movement is pure instinct, muscle memory from 100 tactical situations. "You saved my life, then disappeared like smoke," Morrison says, his voice deadly quiet. Each word is measured, controlled. But underneath, Sarah can hear the barely contained intensity of a man who's been searching for answers for 3 years. Rodriguez, too. And Martinez. And funny coincidence with the name, by the way. Why? Sarah's carefully constructed composure is cracking like ice under pressure. Her breathing becomes shallow, rapid, the kind of hyperventilation Morrison has seen in soldiers experiencing severe PTSD episodes. But this isn't trauma from combat stress. This is the terror of someone whose worst nightmare has just walked back into their life. "You don't understand," Sarah whispers, her back pressed against the door. "You can't be here. You can't have found me. I've been looking for you for 3 years," Morrison continues, his tone relentless. "Do you have any idea what it's like to owe someone your life and not even know their name? To wake up every night wondering if the person who saved you made it out alive?" But as he studies her face more closely, Morrison realizes this isn't the reunion he'd imagined. There's no joy in her eyes, no relief at seeing a soldier she'd saved. There's only pure, unadulterated terror. The kind of fear he's seen in the eyes of assets who've been burned, operatives whose covers have been blown. "This isn't gratitude," Sarah says, reading his expression with unsettling accuracy. "This is an interrogation. Who sent you?" The question hits Morrison like a physical blow. "Who sent me? Nobody sent me. I've been trying to track down the medic who bullshit." Sarah's voice cuts through his explanation like a scalpel. "You just happened to end up at this specific medical facility, requesting this specific doctor for a routine physical? 3 years after Kandahar?" She laughs, but there's no humor in it, only bitter resignation. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore. Morrison's mind races, pieces of a puzzle he didn't even know existed suddenly clicking into place. "Who's they? What are you talking about? You really don't know, do you?" Sarah studies his face with the intensity of someone whose life depends on reading people correctly. "Or you're a better actor than I gave you credit for." Now what? Morrison's frustration is building, the careful control he's maintained since entering the room beginning to fray. "I came here because I've been trying to find the medic who saved my team in Kandahar. I pulled strings, called in favors, tracked down every medical contractor who was in theater during that time period. It took me 3 years to narrow it down to you." Sarah's expression shifts from terror to something even more dangerous: calculation. "You tracked me down. You used official channels. Some of them, yes. Why is that?" Morrison stops mid-sentence as the implications hit him. "Oh, shit. Yeah," Sarah says grimly. "Oh, shit is right. If you found me, then so did they. How long ago did you start your search? How many people did you contact?" Morrison's blood runs cold as he thinks back over the past 6 months of inquiries. The databases he'd accessed, the personnel files he'd reviewed. "I put in the request for this assignment 2 weeks ago. Went through my commanding officer, Colonel Hayes." The name hits Sarah like a physical blow. She actually staggers, her face going from white to gray. "Hayes," she whispers. "Colonel Marcus Hayes? You know him?" Sarah's laugh is hollow, broken. Know him? He's the reason I disappeared in the first place. He's the reason I've been running for 3 years. She looks at Morrison with something approaching pity. And you just led him straight to me. The examination room suddenly feels like a trap, the walls closing in around them both. Morrison realizes that his 3-year quest to find his savior might have just signed her death warrant. Because they tried to kill me for what I saw, Sarah whispers, her composure finally cracking completely. The professional mask she's worn for 3 years crumbles, revealing the haunted expression of someone who's been living in constant fear. Her hands shake as she moves away from the door, putting the examination table between herself and Morrison like a barrier that might somehow protect her from the truth they both now face. Morrison's training kicks in automatically. He moves to the window, scanning the parking lot below while keeping one ear on Sarah's confession. What he sees makes his blood run cold. 3 black SUVs positioned at strategic points around the medical facility, their occupants trying too hard to look casual. Talk fast, he says grimly. We've got company. Sarah's voice comes out in a rush, 3 years of suppressed terror finally finding release. During your evacuation from Kandahar, I wasn't supposed to be there. I was rotating out, my tour was over. But the regular medic got food poisoning and they needed someone with combat experience for the supply run. She pauses, her breathing ragged. When the building collapsed, I was trapped in the medical supply room. That's how I survived the initial blast. Morrison turned from the window, his full attention now on her words. The pieces of that day are scattered in his memory, fragments of pain, chaos, and the angel in bloody scrubs who'd appeared when all hope was lost. While I was working to free you and your team, Sarah continues, I could hear voices from the other side of the rubble. American voices. Colonel Hayes was there with 2 other men I didn't recognize, contractors. Maybe CIA. They were talking about the ambush, about how perfectly it had gone according to plan. The words hit Morrison like physical blows. According to plan? Hayes was selling intelligence to the insurgents, Sarah says, her voice barely above a whisper. Troop movements, supply routes, patrol schedules. The attack on your unit wasn't random, it was orchestrated. Hayes had fed them your exact location, your mission parameters, even the timing of your extraction. Morrison's world tilts on its axis. The ambush that had killed 3 of his men, that had left him and his surviving teammates broken and scarred, hadn't been the result of bad luck or enemy intelligence gathering. It had been betrayal at the highest level. But that's not the worst part, Sarah continues, her voice growing stronger as the truth pours out of her. I heard Hayes talking about loose ends, about how the medic who was supposed to be on that mission, the one who got food poisoning, had been asking too many questions about supply discrepancies. They'd poisoned him deliberately to get him out of the way. Jesus Christ, Morrison breathes. When I realized what I was hearing, I tried to record it on my phone, but the battery was dead from the blast. So I memorized everything, names, dates, account numbers they mentioned. I thought I could report it when we got back to base. Sarah's laugh is bitter. I was so naive. Morrison moves closer, his protective instincts overriding everything else. What happened when you tried to report it? I never got the chance. Hayes must have realized someone could have overheard them, because within 6 hours of our return to base, I was being investigated for theft of medical supplies. Morphine, specifically enough to constitute trafficking charges. Sarah's hands clench into fists. It was a perfect setup. Who's going to believe a medic accused of drug theft over a decorated colonel? The clinical fluorescent lights seem harsher now, casting stark shadows across Sarah's face as she relives the nightmare. Morrison can see the toll these 3 years have taken on her, the constant vigilance, the isolation, the fear that every knock on the door might be her last. I knew I was in trouble when my commanding officer, someone, I trusted completely, told me to keep quiet about the investigation, that it would all blow over if I just didn't make waves. That's when I realized the corruption went deeper than just Hayes. Sarah's voice hardens. That night, someone tried to kill me. Morrison's jaw clenches. How? Made it look like an accident. Brake failure on my vehicle during a routine supply run. I only survived because I'd done a pre-flight check out of habit and noticed a brake fluid leak. When I looked closer, I found the line had been cut. Sarah meets his eyes directly. That's when I knew I had to disappear. So you faked your death, Morrison says, understanding flooding through him. Car accident on a mountain road. Body burned beyond recognition. Dental records mysteriously corrupted in a computer glitch. It wasn't hard. I had help from someone in intelligence who believed my story. Someone who'd been investigating Hayes independently. Sarah's expression grows grim. But even he ended up dead 6 months later. Training accident, they said. Morrison processes this information with the tactical mind of a career soldier. You've been living under an assumed identity ever since. Sarah Chun died in that car crash. I became someone else, someone with no military background, no connection to Kandahar or Hayes or any of it. I thought I was safe. She looks at him with a mixture of accusation and resignation. Until you started asking questions. The weight of what Morrison has done settles on him like a physical burden. His 3-year quest to find and thank his savior has instead led her enemy straight to her door. I'm sorry, he says, but the words feel inadequate. I had no idea. Of course you didn't, Sarah replies, but there's no anger in her voice, only exhaustion. Hayes played it perfectly. He probably volunteered to help you find the mysterious medic, didn't he? Offered to use his connections, his resources? Morrison's blood turns to ice as he remembers the conversation from 2 weeks ago. Hayes had indeed been enthusiastic about helping, had personally recommended this medical facility, had even suggested Sarah, specifically as someone who might have the expertise to help with Morrison's ongoing recovery issues. He set this whole thing up, Morrison realizes. The physical exam, requesting you specifically, it was all a trap. And you were the bait, Sarah says quietly. The perfect way to flush me out. What better way to get me to lower my guard than to present me with a patient I'd saved, someone I'd have no reason to fear? Through the window, Morrison sees more vehicles arriving. The net is closing around them, and they're running out of time. But now he understands the stakes, and his mission has changed completely. He's no longer here to thank the medic who saved his life. He's here to save hers. The fire alarm suddenly blares through the medical facility, its piercing wail cutting through their conversation like a knife. Red emergency lights begin flashing in the corridors outside, casting everything in an ominous crimson glow. Morrison's head snaps toward the door. He knows the sound of a deliberate evacuation when he hears one. Hayes' men are forcing an evacuation to isolate their targets, Morrison says grimly. His SEAL training taking over completely. He moves to his jacket hanging on the chair and retrieves a compact Sig Sauer P320 from a concealed holster. Sarah's eyes widen at the sight of the weapon. You brought a gun to a medical exam? Old habits, Morrison replies tersely, checking the magazine. 15 rounds. Not nearly enough if Hayes brought a full team. He grabs Sarah's hand, his grip firm but not painful. Emergency exit now. Which way? Sarah's medical knowledge of the building kicks in despite her terror. Service corridor behind the nurses' station. It leads to the freight elevator. We can get to the parking garage without going through the main lobby. They move toward the door, but Morrison holds up a hand, pressing his ear against the metal surface. Through the thin barrier, he can hear the controlled footsteps of multiple individuals moving through the corridor. Not the panicked shuffle of evacuating medical staff, but the measured pace of trained operatives. 3 men, maybe 4, Morrison whispers. moving in formation. They're already in position. The sound of confused voices fills the hallway as genuine medical staff begin evacuating, their conversations mixing with the blare of the alarm. Morrison recognizes the tactical brilliance of Hayes' plan. Used the chaos of an emergency evacuation to mask the movement of his kill team while isolating their targets from potential witnesses. "We go on my mark," Morrison says, positioning himself at the door. "Stay behind me. Move when I move. Stop when I stop. If I go down, you run. Don't look back. Don't try to help me. Just run." "I'm not leaving you," Sarah says fiercely. "You're here because of me. You're here because you tried to do the right thing," Morrison corrects. "Now let me do mine." He yanks open the door and immediately spots the glint of a suppressed weapon 30 feet down the corridor. Morrison tackles Sarah behind a medical cart loaded with equipment just as bullets shred the wall where her head had been, sending chunks of drywall and sparks from severed electrical conduits raining down around them. "Contact left," Morrison shouts, though there's no one to hear him except Sarah. Old habits die hard, and in combat, communication saves lives. He returns fire with controlled bursts, his shots forcing the operatives to take cover behind doorways and equipment. The medical cart provides minimal protection, but Morrison uses it strategically, pushing it forward as mobile cover while they advance toward the service corridor. Sarah stays low behind him, her medical training helping her remain calm under fire. She's been in combat zones before, even if not as a combatant. "Reloading!" one of the operatives shouts, and Morrison seizes the opportunity. He vaults over the cart and sprints toward the man's position, closing the distance before the operative can bring his weapon back up. Morrison's combat knife appears in his hand as if by magic, and the operative goes down silently. But the victory is short-lived. Two more men appear from the opposite direction, forcing Morrison and Sarah to retreat toward the service elevator. They fight their way down the corridor, Morrison's SEAL training keeping them alive, while Sarah uses her intimate knowledge of the building's layout to find alternate routes when their path becomes blocked. "Service elevator, 30 feet. Sarah calls out, pointing toward a set of double doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." But as they approach, Morrison spots movement in his peripheral vision, another operative emerging from a patient room. Weapon raised, Morrison spins and fires, but his magazine runs dry. The distinctive click of an empty chamber echoes in the corridor, and the operative's face splits into a predatory grin. Time slows as Morrison realizes he won't be able to reload before the man fires. Sarah appears beside him like a ghost, a fire extinguisher in her hands. She triggers it directly into the operative's face, the chemical foam blinding him instantly. Morrison uses the distraction to close distance and disarm the man with brutal efficiency. They reach the service elevator, but Sarah's face falls as she sees the out-of-order sign taped to the doors. "Maintenance shaft," she says quickly, pointing to a narrow access panel near the floor. "It leads to the parking garage, but it's going to be tight." Morrison kicks open the panel, revealing a cramped maintenance tunnel barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. "You first," he orders, but Sarah shakes her head. "You're bigger if you get stuck. We're both dead." "I go first. You follow." She disappears into the tunnel with Morrison close behind. The space is claustrophobic, filled with pipes and electrical conduits that catch on their clothing and scrape against their skin. Behind them, they can hear Hayes' men discovering their escape route. Voices shouting orders to seal off the building. The tunnel seems to stretch forever. But finally, Sarah emerges into the parking garage's mechanical room. Morrison follows, both of them covered in dust and minor cuts from the crawl. But their relief is short-lived through the mechanical room's window. They can see Hayes waiting in the main garage area with a full tactical team, 6 men in black tactical gear, all carrying military-grade weapons. Hayes himself stands in the center, his colonel's insignia glinting under the fluorescent lights. He's older than Morrison remembered, his hair gone gray. But his eyes hold the same cold calculation that had made him an effective field commander and an effective traitor. "Surrender the medic." "Commander," and you walk away, Hayes calls out, his voice echoing through the concrete space. "This doesn't have to involve you. You've done your job. You found her for us. Now step aside and let us finish ours." Morrison's response is to pull the pin on a smoke grenade he'd taken from the downed operative. "Like hell," he growls, tossing the grenade into the main garage area. Thick gray smoke begins billowing through the space, reducing visibility to mere feet. Morrison grabs Sarah's hand, and they sprint toward the vehicle bay, using the smoke as cover. But Hayes' men are professionals. They don't panic, don't waste ammunition shooting at shadows. They move methodically through the smoke, using thermal imaging and coordinated tactics to close the net. Morrison spots a medical transport vehicle near the exit ramp. Its keys still in the ignition, probably left by a driver who'd evacuated when the alarm sounded. "There!" he shouts, pulling Sarah toward their only chance of escape. But Hayes has anticipated this move. As they reach the vehicle, muzzle flashes light up the smoke around them, bullets sparking off the concrete and punching through the transport's thin metal skin. In the chaos of the smoke, Morrison and Sarah steal the medical transport vehicle, Morrison's hands steady on the wheel despite the bullets punching through the rear windows. The vehicle lurches forward as he floors the accelerator, tires screaming against the concrete as they race up the parking garage's exit ramp. Behind them, Hayes' tactical team scrambles for their own vehicles. But the smoke has bought Morrison and Sarah precious seconds. "Where are we going?" Sarah shouts over the sound of shattering glass as another round spiderwebs the rear window. "Somewhere public," Morrison replies, yanking the wheel hard left as they burst onto the street. Hayes can't risk a firefight with civilians around too many witnesses, too much exposure. But Hayes has anticipated this strategy. 3 black SUVs emerge from side streets, boxing in the medical transport with military precision. Morrison realizes with growing dread that Hayes has planned for every contingency, mapped out every possible escape route. This isn't just a kill mission. It's a carefully orchestrated operation designed to eliminate loose ends permanently. Morrison drives like a man possessed, using every evasive driving technique the Navy ever taught him. He weaves through traffic, runs red lights, takes corners at speeds that make the transport's suspension scream in protest. But the SUVs stay with them, their drivers equally skilled, equally determined. "The radio!" Sarah suddenly exclaims, grabbing the medical transport's emergency communication system. "I can reach the base directly." She frantically adjusts the frequency, her fingers flying over the controls with the expertise of someone who'd spent years working with military communications equipment. Static fills the cabin, then suddenly a clear voice cuts through. "This is Coronado Base. Identify yourself." "Broken Arrow." "Broken Arrow." Sarah screams into the microphone, using the emergency code for a compromised operation. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen, requesting immediate assistance. Colonel Marcus Hayes is compromised. Repeat, Colonel Hayes is running an unauthorized kill operation." The voice on the other end changes immediately, becoming sharp and focused. "Dr. Chen, this is Commander Torres, SEAL Team 7. Confirm your location." Morrison grabs the microphone. "Torres, this is Morrison, Team 5. We're being pursued by hostile forces through downtown. Hayes has a full tactical team, military-grade weapons. We need immediate backup." "Morrison?" Torres's voice carries a mixture of surprise and concern. "What's your 20? Morrison rattles off their location as he swerves around a city bus, the SUVs still in pursuit. "Hayes set this whole thing up," he continues. "He's been selling intelligence to insurgents, killed American soldiers for profit. Dr. Chun has evidence. Evidence of what? Torres demands. Sarah takes the microphone back, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Kandahar 3 years ago. Hayes orchestrated the ambush that killed Morrison's team members. I witnessed him coordinating with insurgent contacts, selling troop movements and supply routes. When I tried to report it, he framed me for drug theft and tried to have me killed. The silence on the radio stretches for several heartbeats. Then Torres's voice returns, harder than steel. All units, this is command. We have a broken arrow situation downtown. Colonel Hayes is to be considered hostile and extremely dangerous. Converge on Morrison's location immediately. The cavalry arrives in the form of Morrison's entire SEL unit, appearing as if from nowhere. Military vehicles emerge from side streets, rooftops suddenly sprout snipers, and Hayes's convoy finds itself surrounded by overwhelming force. The pursuit comes to an abrupt halt on the Coronado Bridge, the black SUVs trapped between SEAL teams positioned at both ends. Hayes steps out of the lead vehicle, his hands raised but his expression defiant. Even surrounded and outgunned, he maintains the bearing of a career military officer. "This is a misunderstanding," he calls out, his voice carrying across the bridge. "Commander Morrison has been compromised, possibly suffering from PTSD-related delusions. The woman with him is a wanted fugitive." "Bullshit," Morrison snarls, emerging from the medical transport with his weapon trained on Hayes. "Tell them about Kandahar, Colonel. Tell them about the account numbers you gave to insurgent contacts." "I don't know what you're talking about," Hayes replies smoothly. "You're clearly suffering from some kind of breakdown, Commander. Let us help you." But Sarah has been busy during the chase, using the transport's onboard computer system to access files she'd hidden years ago. "Account number 7749 Delta Charlie," she calls out, reading from the screen. "Cayman Islands Bank, opened 2 days before the Kandahar ambush. Initial deposit of $200,000, followed by regular payments coinciding with successful insurgent attacks on American forces." Hayes' confident expression falters slightly. "That proves nothing. Anyone could fabricate financial records. What about this?" Sarah continues, pulling up another file. "Audio recording from your satellite phone, made during the Kandahar operation. I managed to recover it from the communication logs before I disappeared." She activates the playback, and Hayes' voice fills the air. Tinny, but unmistakable. "The supply convoy will be at grid reference 7-7 Alpha at 1400 hours. Make sure there are no survivors this time. We can't afford any more witnesses." The effect on the assembled SEAL teams is immediate and devastating. These are men who've lost friends and teammates to insurgent attacks, who've bled and died for their country. To hear one of their own officers orchestrating those attacks is like a physical blow. Hayes' tactical team, realizing they've been working for a traitor, begins laying down their weapons. They're soldiers, not mercenaries, and they won't fight American forces to protect a man who's betrayed everything they stand for. "Marcus Hayes," Commander Torres announces formally, "you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and the murder of American servicemen." 6 months later, Sarah testifies at Hayes' court-martial in a packed military courtroom. She's no longer Dr. Sarah Chun, civilian contractor. Her real identity has been restored, her military record cleared, and her actions in exposing Hayes' conspiracy officially commended. The evidence she'd gathered over 3 years of careful investigation proves overwhelming. Hayes is convicted on all charges and sentenced to life in military prison. Morrison finds her afterward in the courthouse parking lot, both of them finally free from the shadow that had haunted their lives. She's no longer the hunted medic or the suspicious patient, but simply a woman who'd risked everything for the truth. He's no longer the guilt-ridden soldier searching for his savior, But a man had found something more valuable than gratitude. "Dinner?" he asks, his voice carrying none of the tension that had marked their first meeting. "Somewhere without medical equipment or tactical gear." Sarah laughs, the first genuine laugh she's had in 3 years, free and unguarded. "Only if you promise no more routine checkups." Their first kiss tastes like freedom and second chances, like justice served and debts finally paid. In the distance, the sun sets over San Diego Bay, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the colors of a new beginning.